First of all, thank you for joining us today at the Wissahickon Trails annual meeting. If you don't know who I am, I'm Anna Marchini. I'm the development director. But before we jump in, I wanted to go over a few things to make this meeting run smoothly. I know we're all experts at this point, a year in, but just some reminders. There are many of us here today. I can't actually, how many, 70, 71 or so at this time. The best thing to do right now is to mute yourselves so that we don't have any other extraneous noise coming in while there are speakers talking. So we'll have time later that you can unmute yourselves. But we also ask, if possible, that to keep your cameras on. It's just nice to see who's out in the audience. You know, we're desperate and happy to see everyone. So if you can keep your cameras on, that's great. And third, this is a personal preference. I know Jen maybe mentioned something about a different view, but if you'd like to change the view of this meeting to speaker view, you can see who's speaking while they're presenting. And that sort of helps because there's so many squares and faces, and the speaker might get lost, but that's a personal preference for you. And of course, last but not least, we welcome your questions. You'll hear a lot today about last year, our plans for this year, and you may want to know more. But to keep things running smoothly, we ask that you type your questions into the chat. If you don't know where the chat is, it's just on a computer. You hover down, it's a little button on the bottom, it says chat. And when you click on it, just make sure you send your question to the chat, the address labeled Q&A Wissahickon Trails. So we'll have a staff member monitoring that area, and they will help get the questions answered throughout the program, and at some point at the end. We may not get to all your questions, but we'll do our best. Remember, any questions go into the chat box, Q&A Wissahickon Trails. I think that's all for me. I get the exciting housekeeping stuff. So thanks again for joining us, and I'm going to pass the mic over to John Tierney, our board chair.
Thanks, Anna. And I thought I might just start off appropriately enough with our nice Wissahickon Trails banner that was awesome to use throughout this pandemic. But I promise not to talk through it. And yes, you can see the full face, which may not be pretty, but you can obviously know who made the comments. And if you have any questions or challenges, you can let me know. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank all of you as supporters, volunteers, our entire staff, the board, and quite frankly, everybody who's come before us with regards to the Wissahickon Trails. And I thought I'd reflect a minute on a story, because a year ago, almost to the day, it was this week, but almost to the day, I was visiting the Botanical Garden of the Virgin Islands in St. Croix. Or I was at Point Udall and hiking the Nature Conservancy's Jack and Isaac Bay Preserve out on the coast. And we were hearing about something that sounded like a bad case of the flu. Well, needless to say, arriving back in the US on March the 1st, little did I realize that 8 days from then, we would be in quarantine. And by we, I mean myself, my wife, my daughter, son-in-law, their 2 granddaughters who were not on the trip with us, and had no idea of what exactly lay ahead. Everybody turned out fine from a health standpoint, but I thought, looking back, it's very hard to believe that a year has passed. I don't know if you all feel that way or if you feel like it's been 10 years, but to me, it's really hard to believe that a year has passed. And thanks to all of you, I actually think that it's been a very fortunate year. Thankfully, our quarantine resulted in more time with our granddaughters. We were able to spend it during the good weather, out on the trails, in the preserves. And unfortunately, I was able to spend that time. And for perhaps some of you, and you'll be able to comment on it, I could be the real pain in the neck, because I would see people and basically ask them whether or not they enjoyed the trails, they enjoyed the preserve, how were they doing? And I was surprised to find out about 75% in my little informal survey had never been on the trails. They didn't know who we were. They didn't have access, but this pandemic had them discover a place where they could go and perhaps engage in a different type of relationship with nature and a chance to reduce their stress. I got to spend more personal time across many trails, including I assumed it was appropriate to get out there and do the Montco Challenge. So I saw a number of the trails within the county. And I came to a realization of how important the work has been of this organization, and more important, the support that the organization has gotten from all of you, and how important the contributions of those who have come before us and created basically a legacy. And that now it's our responsibility to care for that legacy and pass it on to those that come after us. This year allowed more people, I think you may have seen by the numbers at the front, more people to experience our trails and preserves for the very first time. And because of our new website, the rebranding that we went through back in the spring, which could have been an absolute disaster when you first think about it, and yet I think turned into, it was as if we knew this pandemic was coming, because it began to attract many more people to our organizations. And the virtual technology that's allowing all of us to be together here, and for many, many people to attend for the first time some of the programs that were conducted by our staff. We've reached more people than ever before, and we intend to engage with our communities even further as we move forward. Yep, we've had a pandemic, we've had storms, we had a flood that affected our headquarters in Barn. It's had a tremendous impact, the trails, and certainly the social challenges. And at the same time, because of those who came before us and because of you, including others who can't join us today because they are working virtually from wherever they are or can't access this, and our staff, we've been fortunate to have a place to go. I know for me to reflect individually and sometimes walk with our family. And we've had a great year. We really have had a great year as reflected in the by the numbers, and that you will hear more from Gail Farmer, our executive director, about. And I can't say enough about the fact that in hindsight here, it was awesome. I want to take a moment and thanks our directors we've had some changes in the board of directors, and thank the directors that have served their terms with us. In our board meeting, we did some recognition and some social, so we're not going to do that here, but no doubt they are part of the foundation and the legacy of this organization, and have made us what it is today. Ellen Duncan has served her term, and Ellen, thank you very much. If anybody wants to use the applaud feature on the Zoom, you're welcome to do that. Neil Trueblood as well. Many thanks to Neil for his work and his contributions over the years to the board, and to Bill McDonald as well, who served out the last year of his term, who, these directors, whom I personally have only known probably the last 3 or 4 years, are just tremendous. And they've been an integral part of the history of the organization and the foundation that we're working off of. And I can't thank them all enough. We've had 2 other board members, Scott Bartow and Kim Woods, that, as you probably have experienced within your own families, due to some responsibilities caused by the pandemic, and that, found that they were not going to be able to spend the time that they felt necessary relative to their board duties, but who are still active with our organization, have also left the board. Now, I went back because of the pandemic. I did go back, and I'd like to take a moment to introduce our new board members. And in that connection, I want you to welcome Wendy Weirman and Suzanne Bush, that although they joined our board in January of 2020, I doubt that many on this call would have been aware of that. Obviously our board is, but Wendy and Suzanne, and they've done an outstanding job during this past year. And now our newest board members, we'd like to welcome Ann Laughlin. She's the co-founder of Eco Chic Gardens and has been a member of our Water Resource Committee, and they were elected as new members in our last board meeting. And Brent Hooker, an attorney with Chubb Limited, which is really among the largest multinational insurance companies in the world, and he's a member of our engagement committee. And at some level, when I took a walk with Brent before, as we go through the board nomination process and that, and I should have known better, but I was embarrassed to know that he and I spent a significant amount of time walking on the Walk to Wissahickon the one year. Although I don't think he made it to the station where we got our beer. I have to check back in with him at the 13-mile mark. So before we move on and move forward with our agenda, the one ask that I will have of everyone here is I want you to share what you hear today. I want you to share it with your community. Share it with your friends, with your family, with your neighbors, and last but not least, with your employers and employees. And the reason I raise that is one of the other outcomes of this pandemic has been recognizing through virtual programs with in a number of places, with Penn State, with EY, my old employer, and that this whole area of ESG, and in particular sustainability, has become a real emphasis for many companies in corporate America. And sustainability is all about caring for our environment and engaging our communities. And that's what we're involved with. So I want you to be talking to them. I want to have them join. When you think about legacies, we lost a real friend here recently in Phil Albright, who passed. And Phil had, here in this last year and a half or so, as I got to know him, he had a vision that he looked forward to and wanted to see implemented with regards to the repairing of our headquarters and the renovation of our barn to provide for more engagement of our community through the public programs and taking care of this staff that works with us so well. We just lost a wonderful friend. And as a sign of that, back during this year, he made a significant contribution to this barn renovation fund to get it started. And I'm happy to report today that we have raised almost $500,000 towards that renovation project. We still have $500,000 to go, but I think we're going to make Phil's vision come true. And when you consider some legacies, both within the community, we lost this wonderful friend, not only of our organization, but a wonderful human being. And we're going to have Carrie Fleischer spend a few moments and give you some history. Unfortunately, he and I only got to know each other strongly over the phone. And we had looked forward to one day sitting and having that cold beer together. But because of the pandemic, it could only happen virtually. So Carrie, I'm going to turn this one over to you.
Okay, thank you. So I expect that virtually everybody on this call either knew Phil or knew of him, which leaves me with little more than to state the obvious. Phil Albright was just a huge force in our community. To my understanding, he was involved in over 20 different community organizations, public, private, religious. He jumped into all of them. Most of them, his involvement came after he retired. And I put retired in quotes because he worked harder than I ever did in his retirement. He was a leader in virtually every one of those 20 organizations. He wasn't there to pad his resume so I could sit here today someday and say nice things about him. He worked. He knew the organizations inside and out. He knew what their challenges were. He knew the people involved. And then he would give time and money and experience to help them, and then he'd turn around and do it all over again. When I think of the things that I value in our community, the Wissahickon Trails, the YMCA, Ambler Theater, to name just a few, Phil's fingerprints are all over them. When I think of the organizations in this community that help those in need, Rotary, Interfaith, Maddie Dixon Community Cupboard, and there are multiple others, his impact is there as well. You cannot underestimate or understate rather the breadth and scope of his involvement throughout this region. Wissahickon Trails is particularly special to me, and I know it was to Phil. I think it's one of the few that he remained involved with right up to the end of his life, trying to help impact our future, as John just pointed out. I think it speaks highly of the mission of Wissahickon Trails and his faith in this organization. There's one characteristic thing about me that I know that Phil liked and that we shared. We both like meetings to end when they're supposed to. Me, it's because I'm just impatient. But for Phil, the retired guy, it was because he had another meeting to get to. And so at around 55 minutes in any given meeting, if it was supposed to last an hour, or if during a meeting somebody was carrying on too long, he'd kind of shoot me a little glance, which was my signal to call the question or say something probably for the first time during the whole meeting to try and bring it to a conclusion. But it was a little quiet bond we had, and we relished in trying to get each other out on time. I want to say something that's not just a recitation of Phil's contributions, because that could go on. I think we all know what they are, and I think we all get the sense of what they are. Because, and as significant as they were, what left the greatest impact on me about Phil was the way he did things. A couple of years ago, Michelle and I were picking Phil and Barb up to take them to a Rotary annual dinner. They were in a single family home at Meadowwood at the time, but Phil was having leg and back problems. He had his electric scooter and his walker, and the two of them were both starting to struggle physically. We got there extra early because we thought there'd be extra time needed, which if you think about it is kind of silly, because us being there early wasn't going to impact how quickly they were getting dressed. But nevertheless, we were there, and we wound up sitting in their living room waiting for them. And that was located right next to their bedroom. And so we could hear them as they were getting ready. And they were struggling, they grunting and groaning, and every button needed assistance, every belt buckle needed assistance, shoelaces, the whole bit. You could hear little bits of a little bit of frustration perhaps with each other at times. You know, how should I know where you put those cufflinks, kind of thing. And we were sitting there kind of half chuckling and half and half afraid of what getting older meant. But the thing was, but then they chuckle with each other, they laughed with each other, and they were clearly enjoying the process of getting ready and for this event. They were working hard, and they had to be exhausted just getting dressed. And then we still had to get them to the car and to the venue and out and everything else. But the point was, there was not going to be anything that was going to stop the two of them. Like with everything else they did, there was no quit in Phil, no sense, never a sense that he'd done enough, no sense that it was time to relax. It was just fight on and keep fighting on. Beyond that, the other thing that strikes me about Phil that I remember is that he did all of these things he did without pretense. He drove around in a car with a license plate that said chicken legs on it. He worked the grill at outings. He dressed up as Santa for preschoolers. He did so much, but he never bragged. He never pontificated. When I thought about what I'd say today, it struck me how much I remember the things that I saw or knew he was doing as opposed to anything he ever told me he did. He did it all modestly. The only times I remember Phil telling me about himself was when I asked. Many have said rightfully that he was a friend and a mentor. in my eyes, he was so much of his impact was in the way he did things. I want to end up with a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, "To leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition, to know that even one life has breathed easier because you have lived, that is to have succeeded." I think by those measures, Phil was successful multiple times over. I was asked to speak for about 5 minutes. I'm afraid I may have gone over a bit. And if Phil's listening, I apologize, because my sense is I'm probably keeping him from his next meeting. So with that, I'll turn it back to Gail.
Thank you, Carrie. I'm gonna share my screen. Oh, sorry. Clicking the wrong icon. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our impacts in 2020 last year. And, there are a lot of phrases associated with 2020 that I hope never to hear again. Top of the list, in these unprecedented times. And then I think next on the list for me is "you're on mute." I'd be happy to never hear those phrases again. But there is another phrase we heard a lot in 2020 that I actually want to amplify today, and that was "thank you." We have received so many comments from our community about what our preserves and trails have meant to them during the pandemic, and I just want to take some time to share a few of them with you today, as these words of gratitude really are for you. Getting out on the trails has helped me feel alive, connected to the world, and reduced my stress. The preserves and trails have helped me feel peace and serenity during a very stressful time. Thank you. Nature represents hope, hope that despite the pandemic, the seasons are still changing, the birds are still singing, and that nature is persistent. Thank you for keeping your trails open. For our family of 5 during this time, getting outside in nature is more important than ever. With so many of our kids being schooled and entertained with devices, the trails and preserves allow us to connect back to what is really important. It allows us to pause, to breathe, to ground us. Thank you for keeping your beautiful trails open and for all you do all year long. I am a frontline healthcare provider working in the trenches during this pandemic. My job is extremely physically and emotionally draining right now. Accessing the trails allows me to decompress and recharge my battery. Thank you for providing me with this opportunity. 2020 was a powerful reminder that the value we offer our community by protecting and caring for open space is deeply personal. And your dollars, your time, and your commitment, not just last year, but over many years, it's really what has provided people with the opportunities to find peace, calm, clarity, and connection. And I would argue that this has been our most significant impact of 2020. And now I want to share a video with you that we made last year, which highlights our work in partnership with you to keep the Wissahickon Valley a place where nature and people can thrive.
Well, I participate in a citizen science project I monitor coverboards at Camp Woods Preserve. I go there every other week and I'll flip them. And then if there are salamanders, I'll catch them, put them in a bag, and then measure and weigh them. And then I'll put them back under their coverboard. Salamanders are an indicator species, which means they indicate the health of an environment. So if it's really polluted, the salamanders will be dead or unhealthy. And if there are a lot of salamanders in an area, then that means that the area is healthy.
At Wissahickon Trails, our mission is to inspire and engage diverse communities of people to protect, steward, and enjoy the land and waterways of the Wissahickon Valley. Over our 63-year history, we've protected open space along the Wissahickon Creek. This region has been developed a lot over the last 50 years. And so what that means is that the open spaces that are left, they need to be really high quality habitat to be of value to the remaining wildlife populations.
Habitat improvement really involves making sure that the preserves have what the wildlife that rely on them need to survive. They need space for nesting, they need certain kinds of plants, they need clean water, they need shelter to take cover from predators and raise their young. When we talk about managing habitats, we're really talking about making sure that we maintain a level of functioning health in the landscape.
Volunteers are critical to our ability to achieve our mission. Our citizen science program engages community members in our wildlife monitoring. We have our Creek Watch program where community members become stewards of a stretch of the creek. There are boots on the ground, and all the work that we do it in partnership with the people who live here.
Once a month, between the 10th and the 12th, I show up to my section of creek with a clipboard of questions, water clarity and any new erosion, just things that affect the creek's health. And we jot that down. I have a neighborhood that drains into a park, and so I'm regularly looking at the swells they've built that have wildflowers growing and other grasses, just to see how they're doing because of all the wash off in the neighborhood. And then later on, in front of my PC, I just upload it onto the website and send the pictures forward. Now it's been about 6 years. I think the program's been going, and I've been doing it for 6 years. So they're collecting a lot of data.
So our bird banding program, it's one of the ways that we monitor the health of our preserves. What we do is we catch birds during the breeding season, and we put a small metal band on their leg with a number, and then we recatch them, and that's how we learn about survival. Because birds are high in the food chain, they react really quickly to things happening in the environment. So if there's something going on with the plants, that will affect insects and that will affect birds. So by studying birds, we can see how our actions on the landscape are affecting them in their environments.
Open space is very important for Montgomery County, and the Wissahickon Trails are an important partner for us. The county has helped with purchasing several preserves, which the Wissahickon Trails now owns and maintains.
Working with local municipalities and the county and the state on land protection opportunities, it's essential. They have reach and opportunity that we don't have, but when we work together, we can add value to each other's efforts.
I think education is important and awareness is so important. People don't realize the watershed. They don't realize the importance of the creek. They enjoy the trails, but they don't always necessarily appreciate the importance of the water that flows through our community.
We live in a world with increasingly complex environmental challenges. We've really shifted our work in the last 3 or 4 years to focus really on education through action, getting people involved. I really believe that people benefit when nature thrives.
It's really our mission and goal to provide our children with as many educational opportunities as possible and to really be contributing members of society. We're very appreciative of all of the open space. It's a precious resource and it's really important to us to see it preserved.
What's important to me about the health of any creek, but here at Wissahickon, is to have that hawk flying by and that blue heron. You need to have what's underneath that rock growing as a microinvertebrate to be healthy, so then that fish is healthy, so then that raccoon and that fox and the trees and the bees and things that buzz, it all just starts to connect.
I think what is special about the lands that we have protected is the relationship that the land itself has with the people here. The runners that use our trail, the families that take their kids out to explore the preserves and splash around in the creek, the birders that come out looking for that special rare bird. I see how much they love it, and I see what it gives back to them in the form of those experiences.
And it's just important to keep the environment healthy because humans need like oxygen from trees, clean air, clean water, and the environment plays a big role in that. So we need to keep it healthy.
Awesome. I love that video. And I hope you enjoyed it too. Now I am going to share my screen again. I'm going to talk a little bit about our priorities for this year, 2021. And as I was putting this presentation together, it made me realize just how much we're doing. I was trying to make a 15-minute maximum presentation. Oops. And it was tough. It was tough. But I did. It is only going to be 15 minutes. I assure you. Okay. So, as John mentioned, we faced many challenges last year, and we learned a lot. It gave us a great opportunity to learn, to grow as an organization and to learn. And so that's the silver lining, is we get to enter 2021 all the stronger because of it. And I am excited to share with you our priorities and plans for this year. As I indicated, this presentation isn't going to cover every single thing that we do, all our work. There just isn't time for that, but I am happy to answer questions at the end, any questions you may have about our work presented or something that's not presented. So you can send your questions in the chat to Q&A Wissahickon Trails, and we'll get as many answered as we can. All right, so improving the ecological well-being of our preserves in the Wissahickon Creek is one of our central priorities. And of course, the two are interrelated. In terms of the land, in the last few years, we have been drafting what we call conservation management plans for each one of our preserves. And these plans identify conservation goals for the preserve and then map out a series of on-the-ground conservation actions to address those conservation goals over a 10-year period. And these plans address three critical conservation needs that I think is worth mentioning. The first is that we identify species of conservation concern and needed habitat improvements that will support those species. The second is that the plans will address habitat improvements that make our preserves more resilient to climate change. As the climate continues to change, plant and animal geographic ranges are shifting. We want to make sure that our preserves, we're planting species that will thrive in a warmer, wetter climate. And last but not least, the plans address habitat improvements that will support healthy and diverse wildlife and plant communities. So, we have 12 preserves. Many of them are degraded and not in the greatest health. It might be because of dominance of non-native invasive species or deer overbrowsing. There are a multitude of reasons. But as our region becomes more and more developed, it's really important that the open spaces that we have left are high quality habitat. And so that is an important priority in how we think about and manage our preserves. And the last thing I want to mention about our plans is that we do monitor key plant and wildlife species over time to ensure that our investments in projects results in the desired improvements. And then at the 10-year mark, we review and revise. So we currently have, we have 12 preserves. 5 preserves have a conservation management plan that we're implementing, and we want to complete 2 new plans this year, one for Dodsworth Run Preserve and Briar Hill Preserve. And through the implementation of our plans, we'll be improving and managing 20 acres of habitat this year. And of course, our community scientists will conduct ongoing monitoring at those preserves. In terms of water, if you haven't heard, last year we completed a pretty significant stream restoration project that reconnected the Wissahickon Creek with its floodplain near the headwaters in Upper Gwynedd. And there's a before and after shot here. The before shot, you're probably thinking like, where's the creek? It's there, it's just that's sort of the point. Before this project, you know, the stream bed was very narrow, highly channelized, so the banks were 6 feet high, and the bed was very narrow. And that's the result of continued erosion from storms. And so the after picture, you can see we've widened the stream bed, we've lowered the banks, and when a storm comes, the water comes rushing down into this project site and it immediately disperses and slows down as the water spreads over the floodplain. It allows the water to percolate into the ground, which is what it's supposed to do, and then it, you know, sort of stops that erosive power of the water. So this year, the project's complete. We finished it in the fall of 2020. This year, we're going to be monitoring the project site, make sure it's functioning as it's supposed to, and we'll also be monitoring water quality. We have a partnership with Temple. We work with our creek watchers, and we've been monitoring the site and water quality before we implemented the project, and we'll continue monitoring for several years after installation to see how this helps with the health of the Wissahickon. We also are in our 3rd year of our Stream Smart House Calls program. It's a pilot program where we are working with residential homeowners to identify solutions for their property that will help stormwater be absorbed into the ground instead of running off into the storm drain, which just dumps all that water into the Wissahickon Creek. Projects can be as simple as a downspout planter or a rain barrel, or they can be more complex like a rain garden or a bioswale. And this year, our goal is to install projects in partnership with homeowners that will manage 100,000 gallons of stormwater annually. So land protection has been and remains a key priority for us. And I am pleased to say that it also appears to be a priority for the Biden administration, who has recently set a goal of conserving 30% of US land by 2030. We're lucky to live in a region that's highly developed, but that also has a long track record of public and private partnerships working together to protect open space. The result is that at present, 24% of the land area in the Montgomery County portion of the watershed is conserved, is protected, either through easement or acquisition, direct acquisition. So that's really fabulous, but there is still more work to be done. And a couple of years ago, staff conducted an analysis of all the remaining unprotected open space opportunities in the watershed. And then we prioritize those opportunities based on some environmental factors, connectivity to other open spaces, and local and county priorities. And the result of that was we were able to identify 10 priority protection areas. It doesn't matter if you can see the details on this map. The point is you can see there are the areas circled in red. Those are the priority open space areas. And they tend to be places where there's already a lot of open space protected, and we really want to build on that. And so the plan enables us to be both intentional in pursuing land protection priorities, and it also increases our readiness to act when opportunities arise. So this year we will continue to collaborate with the county, with local municipalities and other nonprofit peers and landowners to continue to pursue land protection opportunities in these 10 priority open space areas. Improving trail access, connectivity, and quality is a major focus, especially of the last 3 years. And last year, we brought to fruition several key tools and resources to help people find our trails and identify the ones that meet their needs. So for example, we have this Find Your Trail tool on our website, which we built last year. And with this tool, you can search our trails by amenities. So, is it a paved surface or a gravel or a dirt surface? Are there bathrooms near the trail? Is it an equestrian trail? Is it a birding hotspot? Is there parking? You name it. There's a whole bunch of variables you can search by to help you find a trail that meets your interests and your needs. We also created, for the first time, to my knowledge, trail maps for each of our preserves. And these maps, they'll make it easier to figure out where you can park, where the trailheads are for that particular preserve. And then we also color-coded and named all the various trails on a given preserve. So you can see in this map of Willow Lake Farm, there's a yellow trail and a blue trail and a green trail. And then on the ground, our staff have been going out and blazing the trails. You can see in this picture, there's a blue rectangle on that tree in the foreground. So blazing the trail so that when you're walking, you know where you are. You can be secure that you're on the trail you're supposed to be on by aligning, making sure you're on the right blaze for the trail you're walking on. And the last thing I want to say about the trail maps is I'm really excited to say that we are in the process of printing our new Green Ribbon Trail map. It'll be a big, I don't know if you can see me because I can't see me, but it'll be a big map like this that folds out and has a ton of information, but then also folds up into a nice pocket-sized rectangle you can just stick in your pocket before you head out on the trail. These will be ready in the next few weeks, and we're really excited to share them with you. I want to take a moment to thank all of you who contributed funds to our MAP campaign last year. And we are excited. You will be the first, if you made a contribution to our MAPS campaign, you will be one of the first to receive one of these lovely green ribbon. This is not a green ribbon trail map. This is just a model. This is for a different trail, but you'll get one of these. Okay. The last thing I want to say about trails in 2020 is that they took a beating. Between increased, record numbers of visitors on our trails and the storms, the trails took a lot of abuse, wear. So first, I want to say thanks to your dollars and your support. We've been able to repair much of the damage from the flood of the Green Ribbon Trail, at least with temporary fixes. However, there is still a lot we need to do to address the increased visitation on our trails. And, ultimately, we want our trails to be able to withstand the demand, but this is going to take time, planning, and investment, and we aren't there yet. But in terms of our work this year, we will be finalizing a longer-term plan that we've been working on. It's a master plan for the Green Ribbon Trail. And this master plan includes a visitation study, an assessment of current conditions, and an analysis of needed improvements, and then an examination of opportunities for new trail connections and expansions. In terms of projects this year, we have 15 projects planned. And here, some examples include, we'll be building new trails on our new Hughes Preserve that will connect that preserve to Briar Hill and to Camp Woods. And we have some more trailblazing to do. And we'll also be making needed trail improvements on the Green Ribbon Trail between Swedesford Road to Plymouth Road. There's a good bit of work that needs to be done there. And we're also designing and building more permanent solutions to some of the temporary fixes that we installed after the Tropical Storm Isaias and the flood. And I just want to add that the conservation crew will be instrumental in helping us deliver on many of these projects. Expanding our community of friends and supporters is essential to our long-term viability and sustainability. There are at least 200,000 people who live in the Wissahickon watershed, and we currently reach about 6,000. That's 3%. So, we have a lot of room to grow. As we work to expand our reach into communities of the watershed, we're asking ourselves some questions. Who have we been reaching and engaging? Who haven't we been reaching and engaging? And And, we really are looking to prioritize communities that are typically underrepresented in environmental organizations in the outdoors. And we're thinking about what we can do differently to be more inclusive and equitable. This year, our board and staff, will be identifying a set of shared goals and action steps for improving equity, inclusion, and diversity at Wissahickon Trails. And we see this work as a long-term journey of awareness and intentionality that really will help us to better embody our organizational values. In terms of visibility, that is important to expanding our community. It's sort of a first touch. And we'll be focusing on print media and social media as key visibility platforms. And we're asking ourselves, how can we be more inclusive in our content? We want our content to better reflect the diversity of people who care about and enjoy the outdoors. We will be doing a lot of community outreach this year and introducing ourselves and our preserves and trails to new people. And we are looking to engage volunteers to help us with this work. So we're planning to offer opportunities for you to help as ambassadors. And our outreach ambassadors, you might table at events or be positioned on a trail ready to meet new people and answer their questions. We're always thinking about how we can deepen our engagement with people over time. So, how can we turn that social media follower into a program participant? How can we turn that program participant into a creek watcher or a volunteer? And how do we turn that volunteer into a supporter? This is a big part of what the staff works on together. We will be continuing our virtual, hybrid, and in-person field programs this year, and we are optimistic that we can restart our school programs in the fall. Our staff has, been in close communication with their local schools, and we also hope to offer our family-friendly Evans-Mumbar Mill programs again in the fall. And, we will be looking to increase volunteer support, particularly in those areas that are core to our mission. So, the monitoring, community scientists, trail projects and stewardship projects with our conservation crew, and creek health with our creek watchers. And we will be looking to cultivate some new partnerships with local community organizations. And then, there are a couple of other things we're doing this year that are worth mentioning. The first, John has already indicated a little bit, but we will be working on flood resilience at the Four Mills Barn. And first, I do want to take a moment to thank all of you who sent in funds in response to our flood situation at the barn. With those dollars, we were able to stabilize the water damage and clean up the facility and repair damaged equipment. Which was huge. Our HVAC got damaged from the storm. And then really our work this year is a plan to harden the barn to future flooding. And so, the barn sits in a floodplain. It was one of the things we love about it, right? We can have programs, cocktails by the creek, beer by the creek, everything's by the creek here. But it does put us at risk for flooding. And this isn't the first time the barn's flooded, and it isn't the last time. So our goal is to make the first floor flood resilient such that, it lives in a flood ready state. Nobody has to run in and pick up things off the floor. And then after a flood, all we will need to do is clean, dry, and sanitize. We're really excited about this project. You will be hearing more about this project in the coming months, and I do want to take a moment to just recognize a couple of foundations that have been, stepped right up from the get-go to help support this project, and they include BLBB Charitable and the McLean Foundation. And so, like I said, you'll be hearing more about this in the coming months. And then the last thing is that we are updating our strategic plan. So we want your input on our priorities for the next 3 years. We do our strategic planning in 3-year increments. And so be on the lookout for a survey from us in the coming months, soliciting your thoughts and perspectives on where we need to be going in the next 3 years. So that's everything I wanted to share with you today. And, although we don't know exactly how 2021 will play out in terms of COVID and any other things, the year will throw at us, what we do know is that 2021 is going to require the same creativity and flexibility in the face of changing circumstances, the same commitment to collaboration and communication while remaining physically distanced, and the same care and attentiveness to each other, to our preserves and trails that 2020 demanded of us. And we can't do this work without your partnership. And there are three things I want to end on, and they are three things I hope each of you can commit to in this year. The first is to lend us a hand. If you have the time to come out and help us manage and care for our trails and preserves by volunteering on the conservation crew or Creek Watch or our community science program, we'd love to have you. We can't do, it's a big scope of work, and we have a very small staff, and you all are essential to our ability to do this work. Two, continue to support this work with your dollars. If you don't currently, if you're able to continue to make a donation this year, it's essential. Individual contributions made up 50%, more than 50% of our revenue last year. And so your contributions really make a difference in terms of what we can and can't do. And I hope you are able to continue to support this work in 2021. And then last but not least, share the love. You love our preserves and trails. Many of you are, love our programs and staff. Please do help us engage and reach new people by inviting your friends, your neighbors to join you on the trail or to join you at a program. We'd love to get to know the people who matter to you and get them involved in our collective work to protect the Wissahickon Valley and keep it a place where people in nature can thrive. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Hey there. So we do have a few questions in the chat. The first one is, which preserves now have conservation plans?
Okay, I am going just to spare any errors. Margaret or John on the call, would you name the ones that currently have conservation plans?
Sure. So Crossways was the first one that we wrote. Camp Woods, Almond Trout, Pisac Preserve, and Dodsworth is almost completely drafted.
Thank you.
The next one is, how is the Wissahickon Clean Water Partnership going? Are there any updates?
Oh, yes. I'm so glad somebody asked that. So here's where the Clean Water Partnership is. A plan was submitted to DEP and EPA. It was like right before the pandemic. Or maybe, actually, it was maybe 3 months before the pandemic. And then we basically were waiting to hear back from EPA and DEP. The partnership has heard from the agencies since then. We heard from them over the summer, I believe. And now the partnership is working to, address the questions of the agencies. Basically now it's a dance to find a plan for moving forward, a shared water quality improvement plan that is both, that makes the agencies happy and works for the municipalities. And so that we're just still in that process.
And the last one that I have for right now is, are there any changes that were made due to COVID that you will be keeping after the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny, when the pandemic started, somebody said to me, and we started virtual programming. They said, oh, get ready. This is going to be, you're probably going to be doing this now into the future. And I thought, no way, like, we're a nature center. People want to be outside. Virtual programming isn't our future. And I was so wrong. Our virtual programs have been incredibly well received. We've had more engagement than ever before, and we all recognize that offering some virtual programming is going to be a part of our future henceforth. We'll still have in-person programs, of course, but we'll also continue to offer virtual. And, you know, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. We've always had a pretty flexible work from home arrangement with staff. So, you know, I don't see that changing. It'll continue. People will still be working in the office, but we've always been flexible when people need to work from home. I can't think of anything else. The virtual engagement is a big one.
And we just had another question come in. Where does the Wissahickon Creek start? I've heard it's under the Montgomeryville Mall.
Yes, yes. The headwaters are under the Montgomeryville Mall. It's true. And it does start from there's a spring up there.
And another question came in. Is there a target date to begin the work on the barn?
Oh, gosh. You know, what I can say is it's like this, it's a dance between raising the money that we need and being able to start, right? So we are in the process of raising the money, and we want to start the project as soon as possible, because right now, you know, besides me, nobody's in the building. So it's kind of a good time to do that kind of renovation work. But we have a target of how much money we need to raise before we can start the work. And we are close to that target, but we're not there. But if, you know, I'm hopeful that we can start before the end of the year.
I don't know if are we wrapping up at 1, or do we have time for another question?
I think we're wrapping up at 1, but I think, you know, pretty much the question, this is the end of the program. So if there's one more question, happy to answer it. Or
Sure. Yes, there is another one that came in. Is there an initiative to remove invasive species of plants around the creek?
So we have lots of, you know, every year we're identifying areas where we're removing invasives, and the conservation team prioritizes which areas we remove, you know, we target our efforts. We don't have like a targeted plan specifically prioritizing the Wissahickon Creek. I don't know if Margaret or John, you want to add anything else to that?
I'd just add that we try to be really strategic about where we remove invasive plants, because when you remove them, more will show up. And sometimes they can become more overrun with invasives. So we try to plan very specifically where we want to focus on particular habitats that are important for certain species. So that's where our conservation management plans come in. So when we remove invasives, we immediately plant native species that will replace them, so that that area won't become more of a problem. So we do have some areas where we focus on creeks through preserves, but we don't have like an overarching focus on riparian invasive removal.
Thanks, Margaret. Okay, well, those are all the questions, and that's our program today. I hope you're excited about this year. I want to thank you for all of the ways that you helped 2020 be a success, and I'm really looking forward to continuing our partnership in 2021. There's lots to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
Thanks.
Okay. I'm starving. An email from Margaret. Well, let me see. Oh, here we go. I'm very slow. I'm very stuck.
He says, I thought you and Wendy might get as much of a kick out of this as I did. Being a sea of penguins would be cool enough. I can't imagine being this one with them.
Is it a different kind of birdie?
No.
Okay. Let me see if I have anything. I'm just stuck. Let's see.
And then because of that robin that I
Oh,
wrote to her about. And the penguin is yellow.
oh,
Really weird one.
Deborah was online too.
Oh, I figured Deborah would.
Yeah.
And this was actually the annual meeting,
Uh-huh.
but we didn't do any awards. There was that, what was that we went to it?
Yeah, that was the annual meeting and awards and stuff. I mean, I don't think it's me, but I might just have too many things open. All right, I have to get some lunch.
All right, well, tell you what, I'm gonna forward it.
Okay. I just can't see my whole list of emails.
So, follow me.
Right, no big deal. Yeah.